In The Lion King, Simba's story is defined by his escape into exile after being manipulated into believing that he caused Mufasa's death. However, if he had stayed instead of running, the entire balance of the Pride Lands would have shifted, creating a very different kind of ruler. One raised not by the wisdom of Mufasa, but by the deception of Scar. Rather than allowing Simba to flee, Scar could have seen a greater opportunity, turning the young cub into a weapon for his reign. Instead of eliminating the only remaining heir, keeping Simba under his control would solidify Scar's rule by making the kingdom believe that Mufasa's son had accepted him as king. Scar's strategy would be based on manipulation, isolation, and control. To ensure Simba remained submissive, Scar would play on his deep sense of guilt, convincing him that leaving the Pride Lands would only confirm his crime. Scar would portray himself as the only one who understands Simba's pain, making the cub emotionally dependent on him. At the same time, Scar would restrict Simba's access to the lionesses, preventing him from hearing a different perspective. Sarabi, still mourning Mufasa's death, would be kept away from him, and any attempt to console or guide Simba would be seen as a threat to Scar's influence. Over time, Simba would become completely reliant on Scar's version of the truth. This control would ensure that the idea of Mufasa's leadership dies with him. Simba, who once admired his father's rule, would now be raised under Scar's ideology, where strength is more important than compassion, and fear is the ultimate tool of power. With Simba staying by Scar's side, the Pride Lands would fall into darkness even faster, a puppet heir. Instead of ruling alone, Scar would use Simba as a symbol to silence opposition, showing that even Mufasa's own son supports him. No hope for rebellion. With Simba still in the Pride Lands, Rafiki, Nala, and the other lionesses would have no motivation to search for him, eliminating any possibility of an outside force rising against Scar, a kingdom of fear. As Simba grows under Scar's control, the next generation of animals would be raised under a different kind of king, one shaped by manipulation instead of wisdom. By choosing to stay, Simba's destiny would be rewritten, not as the king who restores the Pride Lands, but as the heir who ensures Scar's reign lasts for years to come. However, would Scar ever truly see Simba as an equal, or was he simply a pawn in a much bigger plan? With Simba now under Scar's control, the young cub's perception of reality begins to shift. Scar understands that the key to maintaining power isn't just eliminating threats, it's shaping them to serve his rule. Instead of allowing Simba to develop into a leader who could one day challenge him, Scar ensures that he grows into a ruler molded in his own image. This process is not immediate. Scar knows that true control comes from gradual conditioning, not force. Over time, he systematically erases Simba's identity, replacing it with a version that serves Scar's needs. Scar's first step is to reshape Simba's memory of the past, particularly his relationship with Mufasa. Instead of allowing Simba to grieve and understand his father's legacy, Scar reinforces a new narrative, one that portrays Mufasa not as a noble and wise king, but as a flawed leader whose kindness led to his downfall. This is achieved through repetition and isolation. Scar constantly reminds Simba that Mufasa's compassion made him weak, and that true power comes not from respect, but from fear and control. Without other voices to challenge this view, Simba begins to internalize these beliefs, seeing his father as a failure rather than a role model. To solidify his control, Scar prevents Simba from forming bonds with Sarabi, Nala, or the other lionesses. While they still see Simba as Mufasa's son, Scar ensures that he sees them as outsiders who do not understand his pain. This is done through strict separation. Simba is discouraged from interacting with his mother, with Scar suggesting that she resents him for Mufasa's death. Nala is kept at a distance, preventing her from reminding Simba of the friendship they once shared. The hyenas become Simba's new inner circle, reinforcing Scar's teachings and ensuring that his environment is completely controlled. Without emotional support, Simba stops seeing himself as a prince of the Pride Lands and starts to believe he belongs to Scar's rule. Under Scar's guidance, Simba is trained not as a leader, but as an enforcer. Scar does not teach diplomacy, balance, or the responsibility of ruling a kingdom. Instead, he teaches strength over wisdom. Scar makes Simba believe that ruling is about dominance, not fairness. Survival over justice. Scar ensures that Simba's moral compass is removed, replaced with the belief that power belongs to those willing to take it. Fear over respect. Unlike Mufasa, who ruled through admiration, Scar wants Simba to be feared, not loved. These lessons reshape Simba's personality, slowly erasing the playful, curious cub he once was. With no one to challenge Scar's influence, Simba is fully under his control. He no longer sees himself as the rightful heir of Mufasa's legacy, but as a prince being forged in Scar's vision. But despite Scar's success, one problem remains. Simba is growing stronger, and soon Scar will begin to see him as a threat rather than an ally. The next phase of Scar's rule isn't just shaping Simba, it's making sure he remains under control no matter what. With Simba fully under Scar's influence, the Pride Lands fall deeper into despair. Scar's rule was already built on fear and manipulation, but with Simba as his enforcer, his control becomes even stronger. The kingdom is no longer a place of balance. It has become a land of submission and survival. But while Scar may believe he has secured his reign, doubt begins to spread. The lionesses whisper among themselves, wondering if the cub they once knew is truly lost. Meanwhile, Scar himself starts to question whether keeping Simba by his side was a mistake. The transformation of the Pride Lands is immediate. Without Mufasa's leadership and Simba's original destiny, the ecosystem begins to collapse. Scar's rule, once tolerated, now becomes unbearable. Hunger and scarcity. With Scar prioritizing the hyenas over the natural balance, food supplies dwindle and the lionesses struggle to hunt. A broken social order. Without Mufasa's structure, the Pride Lands fall into chaos. Even the hyenas begin questioning Scar's decisions. A symbol of fear. Instead of being a king in exile destined to return, Simba becomes a silent enforcer of Scar's rule, reinforcing the belief that Mufasa's legacy is truly dead. Simba, once the hope of the Pride Lands, is now a figure of intimidation rather than inspiration. Despite Scar's control, resistance begins to form. Sarabi, once queen, refuses to bow to Scar's rule. She is one of the only lions who dares to look Simba in the eye and remind him of what he was meant to be. However, Scar anticipates this. To further isolate Simba, he reinforces the idea that the lionesses blame him for Mufasa's death. Any attempt to reach him is seen as an act of betrayal. This psychological manipulation ensures that Simba distances himself even further. The cub who once saw his mother as his protector now views her as a reminder of his guilt. Among the lionesses, Nala is the only one who refuses to give up. While others see Simba as a lost cause, she believes that somewhere deep inside, the real Simba still exists. But when she finally confronts him, she sees just how much Scar's manipulation has worked. Simba is no longer the playful cub she once knew. He is detached, cold, and convinced that Scar's rule is the only way forward. Nala realizes that if Simba won't break free from Scar on his own, someone must remind him of who he truly is. This leads to a single conclusion. She must leave the Pride Lands and find help. While the lionesses begin to resist, Scar faces his own growing problem. Simba is no longer a cub. He has grown stronger, and Scar begins to fear that one day Simba might turn against him. Scar thrives on control, but now his rule is slipping in two ways. The lionesses are growing restless, and whispers of rebellion are spreading. Simba is beginning to develop his own thoughts, even if he doesn't realize it yet. Scar is no fool. He knows that if Simba ever begins questioning his teachings, his own throne could be at risk. That's when Scar makes a chilling decision. Simba must be eliminated before he becomes too powerful. Scar, sensing the shifting balance of power, realizes that Simba is now a threat rather than an ally. Scar secretly orders the hyenas to eliminate Simba, making it look like an accident. But Simba unknowingly survives the attack, an event that plants the first seed of doubt in his mind. For the first time, Simba questions why Scar allowed this to happen. But before he can fully process it, Scar manipulates the situation once more, making Simba believe that the hyenas feared him because he was becoming too strong. This temporarily keeps Simba under Scar's control, But the damage is already done. Simba, for the first time, has seen the cracks in Scar's rule. And at the same time, Nala successfully escapes, setting the stage for a rebellion that Scar will never see coming. Scar has spent years shaping Simba into his enforcer, a lion who no longer questions his rule. But after surviving an assassination attempt orchestrated by Scar himself, something has changed. Simba doesn't yet understand what this shift means, but for the first time, doubt begins to creep into his mind. The lessons Scar has drilled into him suddenly don't seem as absolute. Meanwhile, beyond the Pride Lands, Nala is gone, and she is searching for a force strong enough to challenge Scar's rule. Scar's power was built on fear and control, but now both are slipping. Simba is no longer a weak cub. He is strong, and Scar knows it. The lionesses, though quiet, are no longer fully submissive. And worst of all, Nala is missing. Scar has ruled with the certainty that no one would dare oppose him. But now, the balance of power is shifting. The very cub he spent years manipulating is beginning to question everything. Scar's plan to eliminate Simba should have worked. But now, Simba's survival has created a dangerous new reality, one where he no longer fully trusts the one lion he once saw as his only ally. For the first time, Simba begins to think independently. The doubts that once flickered in his mind now grow stronger. He starts observing Scar more closely, questioning his leadership. Scar senses this change, and in an effort to tighten his grip, he reminds Simba of one painful truth. Mufasa was weak. Scar is strong. If Simba wants to be king, he must embrace that strength. But this time, the words don't carry the same weight. Scar's influence is cracking, and deep inside, Simba is beginning to remember who he was supposed to be. As Simba's doubt grows, Scar tries one last manipulation, this time by publicly testing his loyalty. Dr. 1. He stages a brutal display of power, forcing Simba to prove his dominance over the lionesses. 2. Simba, though conditioned by Scar's rule, hesitates for the first time. 3. The hesitation is small, but Scar sees it. For the first time, Scar knows that Simba is slipping away from his control. This is the final confirmation Scar needs. Simba is now a threat. Scar must act fast. If he waits too long, Simba may become the force that destroys him. After years of Scar's manipulation, Simba doesn't know what to believe anymore. He was raised to think that Mufasa was weak, compassion is a flaw, Scar's rule is absolute. But now something feels wrong. The memories of his father, of the Pride Lands before Scar's rule, are resurfacing. For the first time, Simba is caught between two identities: the ruthless heir Scar wanted him to be, or the true king he was meant to become. And at that exact moment, Nala returns, with a message that will change everything. For years, Scar has conditioned Simba to believe that he was the only path forward, that his father was weak, that power must be maintained through fear, and that the Pride Lands belong to those willing to take control. But now Nala has returned, and with her arrival comes a force Scar never accounted for. A voice from Simba's past that refuses to be silenced. This confrontation is the first real challenge to Scar's influence over Simba, and it will determine the future of the Pride Lands. When Nala first escaped the Pride Lands, she was searching for help, any force powerful enough to oppose Scar. What she found was something far more important, a realization that Simba himself might still be the key to saving the kingdom. But as soon as she sees him again, she realizes the true damage that Scar has inflicted. Simba is no longer the cub she remembers. His presence is heavier, his movements colder. He carries the weight of years spent under Scar's control. And worst of all, he doesn't see himself as a hero. He sees himself as Scar's heir. But Nala refuses to accept that this is who Simba truly is. Scar has spent years ensuring that Simba never questions his rule. Now, for the first time, that conditioning is about to be tested. Nala challenges everything Simba believes. She speaks of Mufasa's true legacy, of the king he was meant to become. She reminds him that Scar is not his mentor, he is his enemy. But Simba, torn between the life he knows and the truth he is starting to remember, reacts with hesitation. Part of him wants to believe Nala, to remember the past as it truly was. But another part of him, conditioned by Scar's influence, resists. because accepting the truth means facing the years he has lost. This is Scar's greatest weapon. Simba's fear that he has been too deeply changed to ever go back. Scar immediately senses the threat that Nala poses. He has worked too hard to control Simba, and he knows that if he hesitates, he will lose him forever. To maintain his power, Scar takes drastic action. 1. He accuses Nala of betrayal, framing her as an enemy of the kingdom. 2. He orders the hyenas to eliminate her, making an example of what happens to those who defy him. 3. And most importantly, he turns to Simba and demands his loyalty. This is the moment that Scar has been preparing for, a final test of Simba's obedience. Scar gives Simba an ultimatum: stand with him or stand against him. For Simba, this is the most defining moment of his life. Will he remain Scar's heir, or will he finally break free from the past? Nala's return has changed everything. For the first time, Scar is afraid. He can feel his control over Simba slipping. The lionesses, seeing Nala's courage, begin to resist. And deep inside, Simba knows that his next choice will define the rest of his life. The battle for the Pride Lands has already begun, but this time, it is not just Scar versus the lionesses. It is Scar versus Simba. And for the first time, Scar is no longer sure that he will win. Scar has spent years ensuring that Simba never questions his rule, but Nala's return has changed everything. For the first time, Simba is faced with an undeniable truth. His life under Scar was built on lies. His father was not weak. Scar is not his protector. And the Pride Lands were never meant to belong to fear. But breaking free from Scar's control will not be easy. Simba is not just fighting Scar. He is fighting the version of himself that Scar created. Simba is torn between the life he has lived and the truth Nala has forced him to see. He has spent years believing that strength comes from power, but now he realizes true strength comes from courage. But if he accepts this truth, he must also accept the weight of his past. Everything he allowed Scar to take from him. Scar knew this moment would come. He has spent years preparing for it. And now, he uses Simba's greatest weakness against him: his guilt. Scar reminds Simba of the lie that has haunted him for years, that Mufasa's death was his fault. He tells Simba that the lionesses will never truly see him as their king, only as the cub who let Mufasa die. And in that moment, Scar nearly wins. But then, something happens that Scar never expected. In the darkest moment of Simba's internal battle, a memory resurfaces. It is not Scar's voice. It is not Nala's. It is Mufasa. For the first time in years, Simba remembers the words his father once told him, the words that Scar tried to erase. A king's power is not measured by what he takes, but by what he gives. In that moment, everything becomes clear. Mufasa's legacy was never about dominance. It was about responsibility. The Pride Lands do not belong to Scar. They belong to those who will protect them. And most importantly, Simba was never meant to be Scar's heir. He was meant to be Mufasa's son. Simba finally understands who he is. And with that realization, he makes his choice. Simba rejects Scar's control for the first time. He steps forward, not as Scar's enforcer, but as the rightful king of the Pride Lands. And in that moment, Scar realizes that he has lost. Scar, for all his cunning, never truly considered what would happen if Simba turned against him. And now, the final battle for the throne is about to begin. The moment Simba stands against Scar, everything changes. The lionesses who have spent years living under Scar's rule see their true king standing before them. The hyenas, once loyal to Scar, begin to sense weakness in him. The entire Pride Lands hold their breath. This is the moment that will determine the future. Scar has relied on manipulation for years, but now he has nothing left to hide behind. For the first time, he must fight for his throne. And this time, Simba will not back down. The Pride Lands have waited for this moment, for the rightful king to rise. Simba is no longer a lost cub. He is a king. And now, he will face Scar not as his apprentice, but as his enemy. The final battle has begun. Simba has made his choice. He is no longer Scar's heir. He is Mufasa's son and the true king of the Pride Lands. Scar, sensing his control slipping away, knows that this is his last chance to maintain power. His reign has always been based on deception, but now, deception is no longer enough. For the first time, Scar must fight for his throne. Scar has always relied on manipulation rather than direct confrontation. But now, there is no one left to deceive. The lionesses stand with Simba. The hyenas begin to sense that Scar's rule is crumbling. Even Scar himself knows that the throne is slipping from his grasp. But Scar is not ready to surrender. If he cannot win through deception, he will win through destruction. He tries to provoke Simba, forcing him into an emotional mistake. He reminds Simba of Mufasa's death, hoping to break his resolve. And when that fails, he resorts to his final strategy, blaming the hyenas for everything. This is Scar's greatest mistake. For years, the hyenas have served him, believing that he valued them. But now, in his desperation, Scar turns on them, and they finally realize that they were never his allies, only his pawns. The shift is instant. Scar is no longer just fighting Simba, he is alone. Scar has no more allies, no more tricks. Only the battle remains. Simba, no longer the fearful cub Scar manipulated, stands before him as an equal. And in the eyes of the Pride Lands, this is no longer a rebellion. It is justice. The battle is intense, but the outcome is inevitable. Scar, used to ruling through fear, is unprepared for a direct confrontation. Simba, now fighting with purpose, is stronger than Scar ever expected. And as the storm rages, Scar's reign finally comes to an end. Simba defeats Scar, proving that true strength comes not from control, but from leadership. Scar is defeated, but Simba is faced with one final choice. What kind of king will he be? He could kill Scar, ending his tyranny permanently. Or he could show mercy, proving that he is not the kind of ruler Scar tried to make him. Simba chooses exile, refusing to let Scar's reign of bloodshed define his own leadership. But Scar's past sins have caught up to him. The hyenas, realizing that they were nothing more than disposable tools in his plan, turn against him. And just like that, Scar's rule ends, not by Simba's claws, but by the very forces he once controlled. The Pride Lands are free. The battle is over, but the scars of Scar's rule remain. The land is in ruins, but with Simba as king, balance will be restored. The lionesses, once forced into submission, now stand united under a ruler who will protect them. And as the rain begins to fall, washing away the last remnants of Scar's era, the Pride Lands begin to heal. But for Simba, the real challenge is just beginning. Simba has reclaimed his place, but he is not the same lion who was meant to take the throne. Scar's influence shaped him, and that influence does not disappear overnight. Simba is haunted by the years he spent under Scar's control, and the question remains, can he ever truly be the king Mufasa wanted him to be? As he looks over his kingdom, Simba knows that his journey is far from over. But one thing is certain, Scar's reign is over, and Mufasa's son has finally come home.